Hi guys, welcome back to another On Track Off Track with Victor Portagola, and
And I'm Jared Colow.
nice to see you back. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. We've had a lot of really good racing with this 24-hour of Le Mans this past weekend. A lot of really interesting stuff to cover in this episode, including the retirement of the GTR, the Nissan GTR, the double victory, or back-to-back victory, rather, for Ferrari at Le Mans. And as well, we're going to be doing a draft of the best Le Mans cars ever released. But as usual, we're going to start with our on-track segment and talk a little bit about this Le Mans victory. So, as our resident Ferrari fan, talk me through your emotions and how you feel after this amazing back-to-back victory.
Yeah, it was an exciting one for sure. It's always good to see Ferrari on top, and I'm unapologetic about being a Ferrari fan. So as a Tifosi, it was great to see, and it came down to the last lap, and we weren't sure if we're going to take it, but it ended up happening, and you could see the reaction from the drivers and the team. Everyone was so happy, crying. It was crazy, and back-to-back victories is amazing for a team that hasn't been competing in what 60 years or so. So it was great to see. How'd you find the race?
Yeah, I thought it was mostly a very exciting race. Admittedly, I was sleeping during the 4 hours of the race that were under the safety car, which probably is about the opposite of excitement. But right at the beginning, the whole hypercar field was in play for the victory. Probably about 4 or 5 hours in, it became clear that it was really between the Toyotas, the Porsches, and the Ferraris. But even the customer Ferrari, the 83 Ferrari, AF Corsa, was running really well. All the Porsche teams were running really well. Even the Hertz Jota team was up there at certain points. And then the Toyotas, started from the back, made their way towards the front, and then stayed there towards the front the entire race. So there was a lot to talk about. And then aside from that, you had some really exciting racing in the GT3 class. There was a good LMP2 racing, and I think a lot of storylines to talk about from this race. I think the first storyline that we should talk about is the cars that didn't do so well in this race. So the Alpines did not do so well. You had one Alpine engine blow up. They really didn't make it that far into the race. You had the Lamborghinis. I see you have your Lamborghini sweater on today.
Yeah.
The Lamborghini cars, they were able to be reliable through the race. They got both cars to the finish line, and that's an achievement. But they weren't competitive. They were like 15th and 16th or something around there. So that was notable. The Peugeot came back with a rear wing this year. Looks like that wasn't the problem because the car is basically in the same spot that it was before. Um, Talk me through your reactions to some of that.
Yeah, like you said, there was a lot of cars that didn't end up finishing. There's a lot of reliability issues, but there's also a lot of crashes. So, over 24 hours, there's a lot that can happen. And, from the Toyota side, they were reliable and they ended up, getting second place, but they were one of the lucky ones. Like you said,
Hmm.
the Alpines, both of them DNF'd, unfortunately. So, I mean, they're having the same luck as they are in F1 at the moment. So it's not good. But there was a couple other things. The Lamborghinis, it was the first year racing in the top class, and they're not a company known for their racing, on track. They're not as they're not an expert in their field like Ferrari is, or Porsche.
Yeah, at
Um,
least not in prototype racing for sure. Of course, they have some Daytona victories in GT3 and stuff, but this top class racing is something that Lamborghini has never really gotten into before.
yeah, but are those factory efforts, or are they just customer cars in the GT3?
I think they were customer cars, but heavily factory supported.
Yeah. So for, this is their first factory led team, let's say, that wasn't a customer fielded car. So props to them for trying and being out there and, being reliable enough to do it, even though they weren't close to winning, but they were still there. And, talking with our past teacher Maurizio Reggiani, who was the VP of motorsport at the time, they put a lot of effort into this, and it was great to see them out there and trying their best, and got to give them props for that. But there's a couple other things. BMW spun out with their art car and didn't make it through, and as a fan of BMW's art cars in the past, it was sad to see, but it is what it is. That's racing, right? So
Hmm.
another was the number three Cadillac. It was leading for quite a bit of the race, and it ended up hitting, taking no damage, but still, and then it didn't end up where it should have been, in my opinion. uh,
Hmm.
and me personally, I just watched the Le Mans documentary that uh, what are they called? There's a new Le Mans documentary that came out on YouTube by
Hmm.
10 and they followed the Cadillac team from last year's Le Mans effort, and it was great to see. It gave the team a little bit more humanized, on TV. So it was good to see, and I was rooting them for them secretly, especially because they're also a Dallara car and the only naturally aspirated car, so it sounded pretty great, but they didn't end up winning or anything. So, but it was still great to see the AF Corsa team, the yellow car, the number 83. I was they're not a Ferrari factory team, but it was good to see AF Corsa, who's also doing a lot with Ferraris throughout the years.
Hmm.
They had their car, their hybrid system, pretty much blow up on them, so they didn't get to the end there. But it was a good effort as well. Yeah, that was it from my side. Valentino Rossi's team in the BMW and the GT3 segment, that was also great to see. They were doing
Yep.
pretty up until the end. His teammate crashed and took the team out. But there's quite a bit of excitement throughout the race, even though
Yeah.
there was a 4 hour safety car.
Yeah,
uh,
some of my favorite moments from the race included that period. It was probably about 4 or 5 hours into the race, maybe even a little bit less. And the first rain came in, and a bunch of the cars jumped into the pits because they wanted to switch onto the wet tires. But the factory Ferrari and the 83 Ferrari stayed out and took the lead. And then for like 2 to 3 laps, they were battling really, really hard for the lead on slick tires on a damp track. Kubica was at the wheel, and it was just a super legendary moment. So I think that was probably one of the highlights for me of the race. I was really hoping that that 83 car was going to win and Kubica was going to get his Le Mans victory. I mean, AF Corsa, as you mentioned, is a customer team. They are still a large part of running the factory Le Mans effort as well. So they're very connected to the factory team. So I thought that they really had a chance of, if any customer team of any manufacturer was going to have a chance at the overall victory, I thought AF Corsa really had the best shot of all the customer teams. As you mentioned, the Cadillacs dropping back was super disappointing. I am fully and openly a Cadillac fan when it comes to Le Mans and comes to endurance racing, despite the fact that I am wearing my Ferrari cap for the Ferrari back-to-back victory this year. Um, and yeah, I was super disappointed because last year they were looking like they might have been able to compete for the victory if the right happenstance had come about in the last hour. What were some of your favorite moments from the race, Victor?
so there was actually one moment, and it might not be the most exciting, but I thought it was pretty funny. Someone's dog ran out onto the track, and they were trying to chase it down, get it out of there. I saw that before I went to sleep too. So
Oh, that's funny.
some
Um,
weird excitement happening there. Um,
yeah, exactly.
but of course, my favorite moment was the last couple laps of the race, where I wasn't even sure whether the number 50 Ferrari was actually going to finish. It was out in front, getting chased by the Toyota, and the Toyota had the number 8 Toyota, I should say, and that Toyota had a lot more energy left. You could see it on the screen with the virtual energy tank, and it was chasing down the Ferrari. And it had enough energy to finish, but the Ferrari, we weren't so sure. And by the time they crossed the finish line, they had 2% left, and I was thinking, oh God, is he gonna finish? Is he?
Yeah.
But that was really exciting. I think that was definitely my favorite moment of the race. I know it comes down to the last bit, but just to see whether they could manage their energy and still take the lead, that was really fun to see.
All right, so I think the last talking point that we have here regarding this Ferrari back-to-back victory is that this year it was the number 50 car that won the race, driven by Antonio Fuoco, Miguel Molina, and Nicholas Nielsen. Of course, last year it was the 51 car that won, so now both of the factory Ferrari teams have won at Le Mans. Of course, the back-to-back is legendary and puts this Ferrari 499P into a status among Le Mans winning race cars that is pushing towards legendary, and Ferrari is going to want to continue to push that further. I think it's really impressive that Ferrari came into World Endurance Championship with the intention of winning Le Mans, and of course they want to win the overall championship, but Le Mans is the goal. Le Mans is what people remember in 20, 30 years from now. And the fact that they've been able to do it back to back after not being in the sport for 60 years is astounding. And the fact that they were able to do it with both teams speaks to the strength of their driver lineup and the strength of their strategy and engineering, and really the strength of the whole Scuderia. So I want to give major commendation to the whole Scuderia for their work in these past 2 years. And I have no doubts that they're going to push forward and continue pushing for more Le Mans victories in this new era of Le Mans with these LMH and LMDH prototypes.
Yeah, definitely. It was great to see, and I'm proud of the team since I know them. So,
Yeah,
kudos to them.
yeah, absolutely. And of course, this is inspiring our draft, which is going to be in the third part of our episode today, which is going to be the greatest cars that ever won Le Mans. We can talk about the whole history of the race and really break down some of the best to ever do that. But that's going to come after our next segment. All right, so our next segment right now is going to be talking about the death of the Nissan GTR. Nissan announced with the release of two limited production special models that they are going to cease production of the GTR after this year. GTR obviously is an extremely historic car in automotive history. It's a big enthusiast car. The first gen Nissan Skyline GTR was released in 1969 with an inline six-cylinder engine and a manual transmission, rear-wheel drive. That car went till 72 when they discontinued it, and then brought it back in 89 with the R32 GTR that had the legendary RB26 engine, a twin-turbo inline six-cylinder engine. The R32 was continually developed from R32 to R33 to R34, probably one of the most desirable Japanese sports cars ever made. Of course, in this variant, they were all-wheel drive through the Atessa all-wheel drive system, one of the most technologically advanced all-wheel drive systems at the time, and still one of the most technically advanced all-wheel drive systems. And then, of course, capped off with the R35 GTR, which is the one that they're discontinuing right now, was the longest production run, powered by a twin-turbo V6. All-wheel drive, set a plethora of records that we'll talk about a little bit later. Talk me through this, Victor. What do you think about the death of the GTR?
Rest in peace. It's another one gone. We're starting to lose a lot of these cool, cars that people have, and the R35 GTR had a long production run, about 17 years. The first one came out as a 2008 model year, up until now the 2024 model year, and it's been legendary. It's maybe a little bit long in the tooth. There's been a ton of different models and cars that have came out, been updated, replaced, and this thing kept on trucking along. It, Nissan, they have they built a separate factory to make the engines for these things, and it was one person, one engine, similar to the AMG philosophy for the VR38D TT, and it was a crazy engine. People have tuned them up to 2,000 horsepower, and they still
Hmm.
do. Right? So it just shows how robust they are and how great they are. And it was a car that just it's relentless in its pursuit of speed. I got to drive one in about 2017, 2018, somewhere around that time, and I got to take it on a fast spin on the highway, and you see a gap and you just go for it. There's no gap at that point. You just go, and it was just relentless. It might have had its criticisms for being too, of a computer controlled car, but then when you start looking at the cars nowadays, it's still pretty analog. It
Hmm.
had a, it felt like it. It might have not had the greatest engine noise or the coolest engine, with the cylinder count or anything like that, but it was a big, heavy car in its pursuit of speed. The Tesla all-wheel drive system was cool in itself. It was a rear transaxle with a drive shaft going to the front wheels, so the power goes from the front to the back, and then from the back to the front again. And you don't see that. It's a crazy system for a car to have, and it worked really well. It continued on the legacy of the Godzilla cars from the R32 onwards, and it deserved that name. It punched way above its weight. When it first came out, it was faster than a 911 Turbo around the Nürburgring, and it was a fraction of the price. Every year they upped the price a little bit, they updated it. It started with about 470-ish horsepower, and it ended up with about 560 for the normal ones and 600 with the Nismo. So they upped the power, the performance. It was also one of the first cars to break, into the twos from 0 to 60. So I mean, there was all these rumors that you couldn't do it, it'll avoid the warranty, this and that, but still, it was the first car to hit, in the twos, other than like a Veyron or something. So it was crazy. And to come from Nissan, it was one of the only Japanese car companies to continue the legacy of its sports cars from the 90s onwards. Honda really they got rid of the NSX up until recently. Mitsubishi, long live the Evo, but that's dead. And even Subaru, they discontinued the STI. So for us to lose the R35, I think is a shame.
Yeah, I agree. And you talked a little bit about some of those motorsports record, the Nürburgring lap records. I'm just going to give a little bit of an homage to some of the success of the GTR right now in terms of motorsports, in terms of lap times. And the best way to do this is to start by talking about the Nürburgring. In with the R32 in 1989, the car completed a lap time of 8 minutes 22.38 minutes around the semi-wet Nürburgring, making it the fastest production vehicle around the track. In 93, they updated to the R33, and then during testing, they set 7 minutes 59.887 seconds, became the first production vehicle to break into the sub 8-minute mark on the Nürburgring. Then in 99, the car set an unofficial lap time of 7 minutes and 52 seconds around the track in the R34 generation, breaking the R33's record, setting the fastest production vehicle around the track. And then the same goes for the R35. Now, talking about racing victories in Super GT, it achieved 4 team championships and 5 drivers' championships over 113 races, 41 wins, 89 podiums, and 36 poles. In GT1, it received a drivers' championship over 20 races, 7 wins, 23 podiums, 3 poles. In GT3, 10 team championships, 13 drivers' championships, 385 races, 84 wins, 231 podiums, and 70 poles, with wins at the Bathurst 12 Hour as well. And I don't claim to be a drag racing fan, but the upgraded T1 Races Night Fury GTR set the record for the fastest stock location GTR, doing a quarter mile in 6.51 seconds with a trap speed of 370 kmh or 230 miles per hour. This is the type of stats that are going to match up against any legendary supercar and sports car that you put up against it. It's just a beautiful car that has achieved so much, and it achieves so much because of ingenuity and technology and pushing the boundaries of what other companies were doing in sports cars. They say that probably by 2030 we'll get another GTR, but it'll be an all-electric car. I'm sure it'll be an interesting all-electric sports car to talk about, but this has been a legendary run all the way from the 60s when the car was first introduced till now, with these six-cylinder beasts that really in every generation are sought after by every type of enthusiast. It's going to be missed for sure.
Yeah, and it was one of those supercars that people buy to drive. It doesn't have the brand prestige of a Ferrari or anything, or an Aston Martin or something like that. It's a Nissan. So people don't buy it to show off like they do with a lot of supercars. People buy it to drive it. And you got to respect that. It's a car that enthusiasts know. They freak out over it. It's not a car to show off to, the your girlfriend, your friends, whatever. You buy it for yourself, and it's great. And just hearing all those records, it blows my mind. Like I knew about some of them, but it's wild.
Yeah.
The long live the GTR.
Yep. Long live the GTR. Exactly. And although it was one of the best race winning cars, it did never win Le Mans. It did participate at Le Mans multiple times. It was unfortunately never a Le Mans winner, but that's all right because it still has deserved respect in many other forms of racing. But with that said, that's going to move us on to our next segment. All right, welcome to our next segment. This is going to be our draft for today's episode. And in the spirit of Ferrari's double victory or back-to-back victory with the 499P at Le Mans, we are going to be talking about the best Le Mans winning cars of all time. Now, you're going to have to remind me, am I going first this week or are you, Victor?
I believe this would be your turn.
All right, perfect. Well, then I am going to go for an easy pick. It's going to be the first ever Le Mans winner, the 1923 Canard and Walker 3-liter Sport. Beat out a Bentley in a rain-soaked race, much like last night's rain-soaked race. I'm picking it because it's the first. It deserves all the respect for being the first one to cross the finish line at this legendary race. Not much more else to say. It's a beautiful car. I actually don't know much about Canard and Walker. You may know more than I do, Victor. But it's one of those really early pre-war cars. There were, I think, 20 entries in the top class. Most of them were French manufacturers, except for the Bentley and 2 Belgian cars. Nevertheless, deserves respect for being the first. What's your first
Yeah.
pick, Victor?
So my first pick, we just talked about it. It's this year's Ferrari 499P, this year's and last year's. But that's a personal thing because I actually helped on the car. I mapped out where all the sponsors are going to be, and I placed all the sponsor stickers and stuff. So it's just a personal pick for me more so than anything. It won back-to-back races, like we just said, and I have a personal connection to the car, and that's why it's my first pick.
Yeah, that's a great first pick. I totally see it. I thought about putting it on my list as well. And it's funny because I started drafting this list before we watched Le Mans, before the race actually started, and I didn't have the 499P even in my honorable mentions. And now with the back to back, it just becomes so much more impressive.
Yeah.
So my second pick is going to be the Porsche 956, the Group C prototype, one of the most successful Le Mans cars of all time. It took the top 3 places in Le Mans at its first attempt in 82. In 83, they locked out the top 8 spots in their victory. In 1984, they boycotted the race as the factory team and a privateer won. And then in 85, that same privateer won, and then it was replaced by the 962 in 86. It won every single year it was created, even when the factory team decided to boycott the race. And the cherry on the top for that car is that in 1983, in qualifying for a race at the Nürburgring, it lapped the Nürburgring in 6 minutes, 11.13 seconds, which was the overall Nürburgring lap record until 2018, when it was surpassed by the Porsche 919 Evo, which was a unrestricted, deregulated version of the car that they had used to win in Le Mans in 2018, like 30 something years later. It's undisputed one of the best cars to ever go to Le Mans. So that's why I picked it for my second choice.
Yeah, that Nürburgring lap time, it stood as the time for so long. I always thought, is anyone going to break this thing? And it had to be Porsche on its, again, breaking their own record, and they destroyed it. But that was years and years and years of progress. So that's a good pick. I like that one. So my second choice is probably another obvious one, but it's the GT40, the Ford GT40, specifically from 1966, where they beat Ferrari. It's on my list because of the history of it. It inspired a couple movies. It's one of those tall tales that everyone hears about when they start learning about racing in Le Mans. It was a project that took them a while for them to beat Ferrari, but once they did, they destroyed them, got first, second, third place, and it was driven actually by Bruce McLaren, which is really cool. So hearing one in person is insane with a 7-liter V8, a 427 in it, and it's crazy. I was lucky that I actually saw Ford bring out all their Le Mans winning GT40s in the 2016 Pebble Beach concourse, and seeing them in person was gave me it gave me spine tingling moments there. It was crazy. So that's definitely why it's up there for me.
Amazing. Well, I'm going to jump then into my third choice, which is going to be in 1991, the Mazda 787B, the first ever Japanese car to win the race overall, and the only car to ever win Le Mans not using a traditional piston engine design. Instead, it was powered by a naturally aspirated four-rotor. I mean, the sound that that car makes, if you're not familiar with the sound of a four-rotor, it is a deathly sound. If you think it's a normal engine, you'd think it's a broken engine, but they are these crazy cars. It was special as well because it was completely reliable for the whole race. No mechanical issues, no off tracks, no incidents with any drivers, just in and out of the pits every time, consistent fueling, and it took the win in 91 with Bertrand Gachot, Johnny Herbert, and Volker Weidler behind the wheel. So that's going to be my third pick.
That was actually on my list as well. Being a rotary enthusiast, it's always been up there as one of my favorite race cars ever. It won because of its reliability, and people think that rotary engines aren't reliable. So that just proved them wrong. It was also special because I believe it was the first Japanese company to win Le Mans as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, yeah, that was up there for me. You took it from me, but I'm glad I have other ones on my list just in case. So my next pick is going to be the 1995 McLaren F1. So that was it's the road car is my favorite road car of all time. Designed and built by Gordon Murray to be the greatest road car, and it wasn't even supposed to go racing. They modified it a little bit, and customers brought it racing. And so in 1995, they took the overall win. And it was driven by Yannick Dalmas, JJ Leto, and Masanori Sekia. So I think it's one of the last cars that you could drive to the track and then drive it back home after winning Le Mans, which to me is insane. It was such a greatly engineered car that it beat out other cars that were designed and built purposely for Le Mans. It was an underdog, but still one of the greatest cars ever made. And, you see them going for 20, $30 million now. So I'm not the only one who thinks so, but it's, yeah, definitely up there on my list.
Yeah, that was going to be my next pick as well. I mean, the car filled out 4 of the top 5 places in the race that year, and like you said, it was in the second class because there was a whole class of prototypes that were faster above it. It was also, as you mentioned, the last road-based supercar to ever win Le Mans. And forgetting about all that, it was also McLaren as a brand's first ever attempt at Le Mans, and it was a first win on a first attempt, which is something that most manufacturers would dream of being able to do.
Yeah.
Um, all right, well, that was a really great pick. So this goes into my last pick, and my last pick is going to be the Audi R8 LMP car. The Audi R8 raced between 2000 and 2005 in the LMP class and won every single year except for 2003 when it was beat by a Bentley Speed 8, which was a car created by VW Group based on the R8 using a modified R8 engine. So if you put that little asterisk in there, it basically won 6 years in a row. It was powered by a 3.6 liter twin turbo V8. It's a really beautiful car. When I was working for Pirelli Motorsports and the Sports Car Vintage Racing Association, there was someone there that owned one of those cars, so I got to see it race probably half a dozen times, and seeing it go around the track, it's beautiful, it is loud, it is fast around the corners, and it unsurprisingly dominated every single race in the Vintage Racing Association that it was up against. So that's why I put that one there.
I'm jealous. I would love to have seen that. That would have been great. So my last pick is a car that you actually really like, and it's the Porsche 911 GT1. And it's because it was, one of the cars that Porsche had to pretty much build for WEC for the GT1 class, and then convert it into a road car. So the public got lucky that people can drive these things. They're super rare. I can't remember how many they've made, but they look like a 911 somewhat, but they're not really at all. So it's a great looking car. I think it dominated when it entered, and Mercedes actually had to take the same approach later to build the CLK GTR. And it's one of those cars that will go down in history as one of the greatest homologation cars that you could buy. And seeing them race out with the McLaren F1s, with the all the other GT1 class cars was amazing. I love to see it, so that's why it's on my list.
Yeah, that's a great pick. So that rounds out our top four picks, but there are so many amazing Le Mans winners. I know we're going to have a fat stacked honorable mention section here. So hit me with your honorable mentions to start, Victor.
So the next one on my list for an honorable mention would be the 2018 Toyota TS050. That car was pretty dominant. It was the last car to be in the LMP1 class pretty much before they changed it all to the hypercar class. And Fernando Alonso won with it when he left F1 for a little bit. So it was a great car, pretty dominant in what it did, and it's great to see a legend like Alonso win Le Mans with it. So yeah, that's mine up there.
All right, amazing. Well, I have a couple that I need to throw out here. First one is going to be in 1949, Ferrari 166 Mille Miglia. That's the car that put Ferrari on the map. It won in succession the Mille Miglia, the Le Mans 24, and then the Spa 24 hours. That was the racing pedigree that allowed Ferrari to get the funding to create the Ferrari band further and create the legend. Another shout out is going to be the Porsche 919 Hybrid, the LMP1 car that the aforementioned Toyota just competed against. It was essentially between the Porsche and the Toyota for most of that era of LMP1. And I mentioned that car because it won 3 times in a row from 2015 to 2017. And it was this car that was then turned into the 919 Hybrid Evo, which then set the lap time that finally beat the 956 on the Nürburgring by setting a 5-minute 19.546 second lap on the Nürburgring. Let me tell you, if you're a motorsport enthusiast and you have to watch one lap, one onboard in the history of onboards, please watch the 919 Hybrid Evo onboard around the Nürburgring. I've never seen a video that looked so much like it was in fast forward at normal speed. It's haunting how fast he's moving around that track. So that's going to be my other honorable mention from today's episode.
Yeah, that lap is legendary. I see it, and I can't remember what the driver's name was, but he has balls of steel at that. Like, I don't know how he did it without thinking that he's gonna die. It doesn't
Yeah.
look real, but like you say, he destroyed the previous records by a long shot, and that's no easy feat. Barely anyone could get into like the sixes and the low sixes, and they did into the low fives. So that's
Yeah. Yeah, and
but
I'm not 100% certain, but I'm fairly certain that it's still the only car to break the sub 6 minute mark. I think the
no,
VW IDR did
yeah,
6:05, I'm pretty sure. So I think it's the only one under the 6 minute mark. If it isn't, it's one of two or three cars
yeah.
maybe that have gotten under six.
I believe there's one or two. I can't remember. I would think that the IDR would, but I guess not. But
I thought it
it's
was 6:05 for the IDR, but I'm not sure.
yeah, but it's a ridiculous car.
Yeah. Either way, it blows every other car away by a mile, so that's why it's there.
Yeah.
Anyways, I know this was maybe a little bit shorter of an episode this week, but we really enjoyed chatting about Le Mans, chatting about these Le Mans cars, and obviously talking about the death of the GTR. If you guys have any other cars that you think we missed in our draft section or any comments about the race, about the GTR, please let us know in the comments. Reach out to us on social media. We'd love to hear from you. We want to thank again everyone that has been watching these initial episodes, that's been following us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, on our TikTok, our Instagram. We really appreciate the support, and we love to see the growth that we've already experienced here. So we just want to keep it going. Victor, do you have any final thoughts before we sign off?
No, just a repetition of what you said. I want to thank everyone once again. It's not easy, posting all the time on all these different social media things, but we do it, and we're trying to give you guys the best content we can. So thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Well, we will talk to you guys all next week and see you soon.